Welcome to Brain Builders Episode 5. Today's episode is about the distinction between rules and principles. Rules have the form, if this, then that. If the ball is black, put it in vase 1. If the ball is white, put it in vase 2. Principles have the form, to the extent that such and such is the case, thus and such is also likely to be the case. Equivalently, such and such is dispositive of thus and such. Intelligence is dispositive of success. Wealth is dispositive of opportunity. Ambition is dispositive of success. Self-confidence is dispositive of success. Success is dispositive of self-confidence, and so on. Obviously, there are intelligent failures, unsuccessful ambitious people, unsuccessful self-confident people, unsuccessful self-confident people, insecure successful people, and so on. But that is perfectly consistent with the fact that by virtue of being intelligent, one is more likely than one would otherwise be to be successful, that by virtue of being self-confident, one is otherwise more likely than one would otherwise be to be successful, and so on. In fact, it is perfectly consistent with the fact that one's own intelligence or self-confidence or degree of ambition may be responsible for one's lack of success, which brings us to an important fact about the distinction between rules and principles. Rules are absolute. Either they hold or they don't. A qualified rule is still a rule. The rule may be put all the black balls in vase number 1, except for the ones that have dots on them, which you must put in vase number 3. But that rule, though not as simple as put all the black balls in vase number 1, no matter what, is still every bit as binary and therefore every bit as distinctively rule-like as the latter. A corollary is that a rule either holds or it does not. Incompatible rules cannot simultaneously be operative in a consistent system, but mutually opposed principles can be simultaneously operative without there being any inconsistency. This is because whereas rules are about outcomes, principles are about tendencies. Therefore, principles can balance each other out, and mutually opposed principles can therefore exist, albeit in a state of tension with one another. And it is to be noted that tensions are not contradictions. For example, extreme intelligence is dispositive of success, but it is also indirectly dispositive of antisocial tendencies and therefore of a lack of success. These two facts are logically compatible with each other since each is concerned with a tendency, not with a perfect concomitance. But, obviously, the coexistence of these two facts results in tensions, in every sense of the word, that must be resolved and are resolved in one way or another. It used to be thought that scientific laws were given by rules, that is, by truths of the form if X then Y. In other words, by truths that describe perfect concomitances. But this turned out to be totally false. The laws of physics, for example, are given by statements that describe tendencies. To the extent that a given force is acting on some object, it tends to do one thing. To the extent that some other force is acting on it, it tends to do some other thing. And to the extent that some third force is acting on it, it tends to do that third thing. It may end up doing nothing, since all of these forces may cancel each other out, resulting in a state of equilibrium. There are infinitely many possible outcomes, depending on the strength of the forces involved. So any law that attempted to describe such a force in terms of inevitable or even probable outcomes is necessarily any supposed law that attempted to describe such a force in terms of inevitable or even probable outcomes would necessarily be false. The laws of physics and of nature generally are given by laws to the effect that to the extent that force X is operating on object Y, Y does such and such. No law is given by a statement to the effect that if X is acting on Y, then Y will definitely do such and such.